Our last video, we enlisted the help of the Wide Boyz to help us build a crack cellar. During that interview, Pete gave so many good tips that I knew I had to share at least 5 of them with you today to help you become a better crack climber.
So I'm Pete Whittaker. I am a professional rock climber and I'm sort of half of the Wide Boyz. I kind of also really enjoy just general trad climbing and big walling. And I've done quite a lot of solo climbing, both rope soloing and free solo climbing. So I just really like the adventure of climbing, really.
How did you train to free rope solo free rider in a day? Like, while it's not as death defying as like free soloing it, it's so much more work.
So anybody who has rope soloed before will know it's a total like pain.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just for the sort of like up and down nature of it, but also the fact of especially when you're free climbing, like self-belaying yourself. I think that doing that well is the key to being able to rope solo hard things whilst free climbing, being able to get those systems down. So for me, doing El Cap, I basically spent, I think it was like 8 months prior to that, reading and training and just preparing myself for it, because I didn't even know how it worked or anything. So the first thing I did was read Andy Kirkpatrick's book called Me, Myself and I, which is a guide to how to rope solo essentially. So I read that, and then I went out on the local crags around Sheffield in the Peak District and just did some really small single pitch stuff. And then before going to Yosemite, I decided to take a trip to Squamish, which is kind of like a mini Yosemite. It's like it's like a training ground for Yosemite, and I was just able to do multi-pitch routes there and, you know, get the changeovers right and also lead some harder things and longer pitches.
Were you using a Revo or a Gree or something different?
I was using, back in 2016, I was using, what's it called, a Silent Partner. Yeah, I think the Silent Partner is the common one for lead rope soloing.
Oh, okay.
Although they're not manufactured anymore, so they're really hard. They're really hard to get hold of. Yeah. And then I think for top rope soloing, people have many different things for top rope soloing. Yeah, so many different devices for that.
Yeah, I just use double micros because I tend to have micros everywhere, and so it's like, okay, this is easy.
Yeah, I mean double micro works well. I also had some. I've got one called, what's it called? I think it's a Camp Lift.
Okay, yeah.
Which is quite good as well because it doesn't have the teeth.
Cool. What is your favorite crack climb of all time?
It's really difficult to like pinpoint a specific climb, but like an area which I really love crack climbing, which is kind of quite unexplored, is Canyonlands National Park, where all the massive roof cracks are. So it's where Sentry Crack is, and it's where Necronomicon is. They're the 2 most famous routes down there. But over the years, me and Tom have spent quite a lot of trips down there, establishing first ascents. And it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool location, yeah, for sure. It's difficult to like pick one single route.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
It is quite an elite area in a way, and you have to get permits to go there. So because it's all roof cracks as well. I mean, you're kind of starting at 512B at like the easiest, which is obviously going to be like difficult for a lot of people. I would say if you're climbing in the 13s, it's amazing. There's loads of like really good hand cracks down there, and like
sick.
Yeah. It's not just off-witting. No, God no.
The ones that I've like seen have been you guys putting them up, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready for 513 overhang off with yet. I mean, I know like with Sheffield, there's like a bit of a history, right, with like training cellars. Is that right?
Yeah, there's definitely a history in Sheffield of training cellars all the way back from the 90s. Ben Moon and Jerry Moffat were sort of like putting up the hardest routes in the world. It was funny actually because I listened to a podcast from Ben Moon just a few days ago actually, and he was saying how many sort of these little Sheffield cellars there were around that time, and the scene of climbers going around them. So I don't think particular, like, I don't think the crack cellar particularly came from that idea of, in that sense. I think it was more that is a space which can be used.
How long did the cellar take to get from like strapping the first one from the A-frame into the cellar to like 75 feet long with like 4 different crux boulder problems throughout it? Well, I guess it had to be like, what, like 8 years? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved. So initially, that original crack just went in first, and then probably like 6 months later or something, we built the off-widthing stuff, because at that point we were really into off-width climbing. And we were just training for like the Century Crack and the off-widthing trip we did to the States. And that's when that got built. But at that time, there wasn't really anything else in there.
Was the majority of the training for that one like the slanted crack that you could kind of like get partway in?
Yeah, that one.
Like you get there like doing the curls and shit. Like
yeah. So that one, that was more just like a box or a slot that we practiced arm barring and chicken winging in, but didn't actually do any moving. And we did a bit of training in there, but I wouldn't say it was the main thing for us for training for off-widths. The main thing we trained on was the crack that was sort of like the same width as Century Crack.
okay.
I mean, that whole off-width training, when me and Tom went in 2011, I would say we were really, really strong for off-widths, but our actual technique at the time for off-width climbing like wasn't great, I would say, just because we hadn't done very much of it outside. And then we decided to go and do Necronomicon, which is the 8B 8B plus in Canyonlands, and that was like a thin hand crack. So then we added like a thin hand crack to it, and then I think it was the year after that, Tom got an extension to the upstairs, so he had some like new build to the house. And as the build, it's quite funny actually, because as the builders were making, laying the foundations, they were about to fill this new big gap of foundations with concrete, and Tom was like, whoa, 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 does it have to actually be filled with concrete? And they were like, no, it doesn't have to be filled with concrete. And Tom was like, yeah, keep it, because it makes an extra cellar. So then we basically got like a massive extension to the cellar. And then when we got that, we just started like, just not really in any kind of order or that much thought, but just started like strapping loads more cracks to the roof. And just making projects and training. And well, what we've learned over the years, like training and the crack cellars and stuff like that, is, or any training in general, you want to like make it comfortable. And although there can be like an element of pain of climbing cracks outside, when you're training, I think it's important to be like, training the muscles and the fatigue and the physical aspect in your body, rather than stopping 20 minutes into the session because you're just like cut up to pieces. Like it's like that's definitely what we've learned. Like it's really important to just make it as friendly as possible. You can still make it really hard, just has to be like kind on your skin, or else it's pointless.
Like 12 minutes into your crack at your own house and you got like gobies everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
pointless.
Yeah, nobody's going to enjoy that. The other thing about the cracks, I think it's really worked for me and Tom, is not having the cracks adjustable. I know some people really like to make them adjustable, but for us it's been good, because if there's the possibility of adjusting it, you might, and you sort of climb on it and it's too hard, you might just adjust it a little bit and you're like, okay, now that's a little bit easier, now I can start climbing on it. Whereas we've always been under the impression like, get on it, if it's too hard, we haven't made this adjustable, so we just have to climb on it anyway. And then that's how it's always worked. These things have always been like pretty difficult at the beginning, and then you start climbing on it and they just become easier. I'm not sure if that's a very good way, but that's kind of the way we've gone with it. I
think it's good rationale, because like all of a sudden, if you make a 60-foot line of cracks, they're all adjustable. Well, pretty quickly, they're all going to be like perfect hand jam. And before you know it, okay, great, I can hand jam anything, but like, how is my 3.5-inch crack game? How's my 0.75s? Like, do you have any ideas for fingers?
We've done some stuff outside of the cellar when we were training for like Cobra crack.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want it in a roof, we wanted it more on like a 30-degree overhang or whatever. We basically built, again, same sort of construction and then we had little sort of wooden chips or like wooden pieces inside the crack, again, as sort of like the spacer to the finger crack width.
Okay.
And then we podded out above those spacers, just to make it a bit more comfortable on the fingers, and then like really rounded the edges off. And it was kind of like halfway in between a finger jam and pulling as you would on a 2-finger pocket. I would say we've never really trained for finger cracks how you would climb a pure splitter in Indian Creek, for example. It's always been a mixture between half jamming and half finger strength.
So it's not like perfectly splitter.
No, okay. Not perfectly splitter. Because on wood, it's just horrendous. And also for training, it's horrendous. So, and also that depends on the steepness of the crack as well. Actually, for finger cracks, we don't do that much like foot jamming training.
Okay.
We've actually just generally used little footholds around the edge of the crack.
Okay. That you're not like totally destroying your toes in practice.
Yeah, and also you can just like feel like the training effect is a little bit better. It's just that whole thing of like finger cracks on wood, beating cracks on wood. It's just kind of horrendous.
Yeah.
Especially if you like make it pretty steep.
I guess maybe besides the Cobra crack, were you guys setting the like either the crack line or like the sizes based on specific projects? I guess probably for Century Crack as well.
Yeah. We've always built the cracks in terms of for projects. I think that's quite important with training to be able to keep it fun in a way. And that's definitely what me and Tom have. I feel like we've kept that down there. It's never got boring because we've always just like, added a little bit here, a little bit there, like a different loop around here or whatever. And kind of just, there hasn't really been much plan to it, but it's always like felt interesting.
What is the most like useful aspect of like training for crack climbing that you've found?
It's definitely always been the idea about building replicas, and that's definitely always helped us. So obviously, like with Cobra Crack, we weren't training in a roof, for example. We were training on everything from like 20 degrees to 45 degrees. And then obviously like the difficult stuff, the difficult roof climbing down in Canyonlands, we've always been training on roofs because that's what it is. And then when we were training for Recovery Drink, which again is more of like a 25 to 45 degree route, we weren't training so much in the roofs in the cellar. We were training more on like a board with cracks on a board and stuff. To replicate that. It's definitely always been replicas. But I would say if you're climbing, if you want to go and climb like splitters in Indian Creek, for example, one thing that I have found on basically any sizes from ring lock and up, if you train on 45 degrees to a roof, then Indian Creek feels so easy. Ring locks is just like impossible to train in a roof, so you can only really train that on like, I think we trained it on 30 degrees maximum.
Okay.
And then for like thin hands, paddle hands, cupped hands, all that kind of stuff, if you train it in a roof and then go back to like normal crack climbing, like vertical stuff, just feels so easy.
And you kind of almost got to pick a project that's like a couple grades harder, or like a style that I suck at, to be like, okay, cool, like this is one, because then you build it, you can actually like get stronger on it for a while before you're like, okay, I'm ready to do it in 2 weeks. And now you're like, well, that was cool, but I just spent all this time. I spent 2 months building this damn crack, and now I use it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. There's not much point in that. Yeah, you need. I mean, projects should be hard, so
yeah.
Need them to
there
be
you
hard.
go. Quote of the day.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, nice one. Cheers for that. Speak soon.
Cheers. And if you want to see the full building of the crack cellar, check out the video linked below.